Hello everyone. Because we live in this capitalist system where we have little choice but to either work for a boss, go on the dole or starve, we often find that when we go to work we will be treated unfairly and exploited. This is something that I have experienced personally during my first job, which was working for one of these cutesy, small, liberal businesses, which touts itself as being super ethical, unlike these big, scary, faceless corporations, when in reality they're both just as bad. Now, I was on a 0 hours contract, which is fucking shit to begin with, because you barely have any meaningful rights whatsoever. And my exciting job was to serve customers at the till and to move frozen ready meals from one set of freezers to another. Fascinating stuff, eh? Now, I have a diagnosis of Asperger's syndrome, which means, among other things, that I find it a little bit difficult to talk to people and to communicate and interact socially. It might not seem like that in my videos because I'm just working from a script and I'm talking to a piece of equipment. But when I'm off the cuff talking to an actual flesh and blood human being, it's a very different story. I also have some mild issues with sensory processing, particularly auditory processing. I'm very sensitive to sounds like the vacuum cleaner, hair dryers, sirens, noisy environments generally, and I also have absolute pitch. I didn't make my boss aware of this during my job interview because if you do that, then the chances are they won't hire you due to the large amount of prejudice and stigma that exists towards people on the autistic spectrum. However, I did disclose it on my first shift, and my boss's immediate reaction was, "It's not really bad, is it?" And that just immediately concerned me because I felt that they were just going to treat this as this inherently negative thing that means that I'm less competent, so they have more of an excuse to try to underpay me instead of actually just doing the right thing and making the reasonable adjustments that are necessary for someone like me to get on in the workplace just as well as anybody else. Employers in the UK are legally obliged to do this under the Equality Act of 2010. Now, during one of my shifts, my boss was giving these incredibly vague instructions that I had no idea how to interpret. There were lots of customers coming in, so it was very noisy and very busy. I was serving customers at the till, and I really had been given very little training because I wasn't given many hours, and I didn't really know what I was doing. So this was getting really stressful, and for someone on the spectrum, this is just going to be a recipe for disaster. So I was getting really stressed, anxious, and overstimulated. So I said to my boss, you know what, I need to take a very short, 10, 15-minute break to just calm down and get things under control. In my opinion, this falls well within the remit of reasonable adjustments. Now, I was given a 15-minute break, which was then deducted from my lunch break because, as we all know, if you have the nerve to get anxious at work because of a condition that you don't have control over, then you deserve to have a shorter lunch. Yeah, that's fair, isn't it? Then I got a call the next day saying that I'm sacked, and I tried to collect my pay and found that they tried to underpay me, not only at a rate which was lower than what they had promised they would pay me, but also for the hours that I had worked turned out to be lower than the national minimum wage for my age bracket. So this is a simple case of wage theft. I spoke to one of my friends about it, spoke to many friends actually. They organised a Twitter storm and I ended up getting my cash that I was promised. Now, this situation at my work was very stressful, very unpleasant, and I would even go as far as to say that it was a contributing factor in my sort of depressive mood that I had for much of last year. The bad news is that we live in a capitalist system and this kind of thing happens all the time. The good news is that we don't have to take this shit. We can fight back. So today I want to outline a series of escalating tactics that can be used if you ever find yourself in a situation where your boss is treating you like shit. Now, these are taken from the Anarchist Federation's pamphlet about work in the capitalist society. Happy looking worker there, not being exploited or oppressed at all. Yeah, what's the matter? It's only, 12 more hours to go? Then you'll be free as a bird. Cheer up. So why do we use a series of escalating tactics? Well, it means that rather than throwing our most powerful punch from the start, or simply trying out different actions in random order, we figure out all of the different collective direct actions that we could take against the bosses and rate them from weakest to strongest. in terms of how much it would impact the boss's profits and also how much energy it would take out of those involved. We then start the campaign with the weakest action, and then if that fails, then we go to the next action on the list and continue to escalate until we get the desired effect. This has some really quite key benefits. First of all, we might win concessions far sooner and for far less effort than we might have originally anticipated. And people aren't so tired out or disheartened if the first action is not some big push that the boss manages to survive. We can use the space between escalating tactics to think things over, to prepare for any impending backlash for our actions, and also to change course if required. At the same time, bosses don't just have to weather the storm of our current activity, but they also have to start worrying about what might happen next. The effects of profit loss happening now are compounded when there's real fear of the possibility of ever more profit-harming actions happening further down the line. And it's often this factor that will win the struggle in the workers' favour. What follows is a series of various different kinds of collective direct actions that can be taken in order to win a worker's struggle. The demand delivery. This is usually the first action taken in a series of escalating tactics. A letter is produced with any outstanding grievances listed, the demands being made to resolve the issue, and a declaration that if the demands are not met within a certain time frame, then further action will be taken. The people with the grievance then gather along with as many people that will stand in solidarity with them and march on the target to deliver the letter. Once those with the grievances hand it over, everyone leaves to clapping from everyone present before dispersing. While the action can be over in mere minutes, the show of collective strength and solidarity can sometimes be enough to sway the boss's mind. The communications blockade. Businesses today rely on their ability to stay in contact with customers, a state of affairs which we can use to our advantage. A communications blockade is where a mass of people complain about the situation at hand by phone, email, website, social media and fax to the bosses all in the same time period. The length of time the blockage is set to take place can be scaled to suit the numbers that you have at your disposal, and it's a good action to engage friends, family and general supporters. Many smaller disputes have been won with a communications blockade. These tactics can also be particularly effective with businesses that are very reliant on getting good reviews online. Go-slows, sit-ins and occupations. A go-slow works exactly as it sounds. The workforce pick a speed to work at and stick to it rigidly. This is where collective action is vital, because even if a few workers were to break from the agreed pace, then there would be the chance for the bosses to victimise those who refused to scab. By the way, scabbing is when you undermine collective action by, for example, doing something like crossing a picket line. Sit-ins are similar to go-slows, only that they have a clear physical expression. People stop work and sit down. While this can be effective, management will try their best to carry on before police or security come in to remove everyone. The occupation takes this a step further, where the workers actively take over a plant and deny access to the management. The latter requires a high level of militancy and good rank-and-file organisation, as well as solidarity. An occupation requires a high level of militancy and organisation on the part of the workers concerned. It's doomed if they remain isolated from the rest of organised labour and the working class generally, but in the right conditions it can be dynamite. What's needed is mass involvement. Workers should not be presented with a plan. Rather, an effective occupation must be preceded with mass popular meetings to plan the occupation and lots of promotion to gather popular support, both in the place of work and beyond. Occupation can also be used to prevent eviction by bailiffs, as groups of people use their bodies to block the streets and entranceways to the target properties. In areas where there are a large number of houses under threat, a phone tree and internet callouts can be used to gather numbers quickly, but really nothing beats having everybody there at the property before the bailiff starts their work and staying there until they go home. Boycott, protest, picket line and strike. Boycotts and protests try to hit the profitability of a business by pointing out the flaws of the employer and encouraging customers to shop elsewhere. Boycotts are rarely effective by themselves, as by making the battle at the point of purchase, they make it relatively easy for the boss to weather the storm and wait for customers to return. Far more effective is to strike at the point of production. This involves the workforce and their supporters blockading the entrances, forming what's known as a picket line, preventing scab workers from getting in, and also transport of goods and work vehicles from getting out. Wildcat strikes are when the workforce ballot in person and walk off the job there and then to form a picket line. As this occurs without notice, the boss's ability to minimise the impact of a strike is non-existent. Strike action can also be taken at the same time as other workplaces and communities, even if you have no demands of your own. Even if the strikers are somehow superficially unconnected, this does make the original demands easier to achieve, because the bosses have to manage not only their own workforce going on strike, but multiple strands of the economy being shut down. It's also in our own interests to make solidarity striking commonplace, as it means that when the time comes for us to make demands, we know that we can rely upon the mutual aid of others to help us achieve our goals. Wildcat and solidarity strikes may well be illegal, but combined they are the most powerful kind of industrial action. When undertaken successfully, they have almost always included a demand to have no negative outcomes for the strikers, which is backed by a threat of harsh repercussions if not kept. Outside of the formal workplace, there's also a history of reproductive labour strikes. This can take many forms, from the rent strike, where a group of tenants refuse to pay any rent until their demands are met, through to sex strikes, organised by groups of women who refused sex with their partners until conditions were changed for them. Any type of unpaid labour could be targeted and very quickly have a knock-on effect to be addressed. The sit-in. A sit-in is a way to strike without striking. The idea is to cripple your workplace by having most or all of the workforce call in sick at the same time. Unlike a formal walkout, it can be used effectively by departments and work areas rather than the whole workforce, and as it's usually informal, it tends to catch management off guard. Sometimes even just the hint of flu doing the rounds and the likelihood of it spreading to important areas of work can work wonders with a stubborn boss or supervisor. Work to rule. This is another powerful tool at our disposal today. Every industry is covered by a mass of rules and regulations that, if applied strictly enough, can make work difficult, if not impossible. Well, the idea of following the rules very strictly may inconvenience workers for a short time. If they stay focused, it will ruin the profitability of the business, leaving bosses powerless to fight back. After all, you are just following the rules. Even an agreement not to take overtime for a short period can be effective if applied at the right moment. Sabotage, collective theft, and expropriation. Another way that workers can choose to strike at the point of production is to throw a spanner in the works. Machinery is damaged, parts go missing, work bottlenecks around vulnerable parts of production, and all the workers say they have no idea what's happening. Other times, rather than things randomly breaking down, things go missing. Businesses have lots of checks in place to try to prevent theft from happening on a small scale, but they're very rarely prepared for acts of large-scale collective theft that can't be pinned on any one person. These are risky tactics, but they're sometimes needed. This concept of collective theft can also be used to have our social reproductive needs met, while minimising the amount of paid work that we have to do. Individualised shoplifting can be scaled up so that a group enters the target shop, loads up on goods and leaves quickly with a plan figured out in advance as to how they want to redistribute the goods to those that need them. Often this can be done while getting the passive support of staff. This is known as expropriation, and as well as being done to items in a supermarket, it can also be applied to taking over property, such as squatting in an unused building, or when a point of production is taken under collective control. Good work and taking charge. Sometimes breaking the rules can hurt other segments of the working class, in a way that turns them against your struggle, isolating you and giving the bosses a chance to win. Good work is about breaking the rules in a way that hurts the bosses but helps everybody else. Letting customers go without paying, adding on extras, going the extra mile when you just don't have to, and generally finding ways of making your work more fulfilling and satisfying to everybody except the bosses and their profits. Taking Charge takes good work and mixes in the ideas of an occupation, except this time the workers get together and decide collectively how they want to do the work, and they do it like that right in the boss's face. When workers decide collectively that they want to do what they want to do instead of what the boss is telling them to do in terms of how they run their work, there's not a lot that can be done to stop that. These acts of collectively deciding how to subvert their job roles can bring workers closer to activity as it would be under communism, meeting everyone's needs in a way that we all find acceptable. So these are just some of the ways that we can resist exploitation at work. One of the things that wasn't covered in this AFED pamphlet is the piss strike. Now, this is like a combination between a go slow and a work to rule, where the workers will agree to take it in turns to go to the toilet on a rota. Now, London Underground tube workers used this to quite remarkable effect. They had a system where they had to be accompanied by a safety manager of some sort at all times. All of the workers had to be accompanied by this manager. Now, it was quite a long walk to the nearest actual toilet, but there was only one safety manager. So with the piss strike, you ended up with having all of the workers going to and from the toilet, being accompanied by this manager, effectively getting no work done without actually having to go on a formal strike. This was actually remarkably effective because they did get the concessions that they were looking for. You can check out the rest of the Anarchist Federation's pamphlet on work at afed.org.uk, as well as some of our other publications, including an introduction to anarchist communism, the role of the revolutionary organisation, basic Bakunin, and revolutionary women. We also have a theoretical and current affairs magazine called Organise and the regular Resistance Bulletin. All of this is available online and can be downloaded for free. And if you're a lone anarchist in the UK wondering what to do with yourself, I would recommend getting in touch with your local AFED group and getting involved. This has been Libertarian Socialist Rants. Thanks for watching. Bye bye.